Ibadan, Makola, where Shola was born, is a city of brown roofs and endless hills, a place where stories are whispered into the wind and where strength is woven into the souls of its women. The ancient town was both her cradle and her cage. She grew up in a modest home made of cracked cement walls and rusting zinc roofing, nestled near the Makola hill. The mornings smelled of pap and charcoal smoke. The evenings were filled with moonlit folktales and the lull of crickets. Her father, Abioye, was a bus driver who sang Yoruba proverbs as he drove through pothole-ridden roads. Her mother, Folake, ran a small stall that sold roasted plantain and groundnuts. They were not rich, but they were whole. Abioye used to lift her onto his shoulders and say, "My daughter, you will not bow your head for life. You will rise." But life, as it often does, had other plans. One rainy Harmattan morning, tragedy struck. Adebayo's bus collided with a fuel tanker on the express road between Iwo Road and Oju. The crash killed 5 people. Adebayo's lifeless body was pulled from the mangled wreckage hours later. The news shattered Folake. Within days, the grief consumed her and she collapsed beside her daughter, never waking up again. At only 15, Shola became an orphan. Her uncle's men with harsh voices and hollow promises came to her parents' house like vultures. They took everything: the land papers, her father's old motorcycle, even her mother's cherished wedding beads. Then they turned to Shola and muttered, "We'll take care of her." Taking care meant turning her into a maid. They sent her to live with her father's elder brother in the outskirts of Bodija. There she was stripped of her dignity. She washed clothes till her fingers bled, fetched water from a distant well, and slept on the floor beside the dog kennel. Her cousins mocked her constantly. "See the orphan," they whispered. Her parents couldn't even leave her a single kobo. Her cries at night became part of the house's silence. No one answered them. And then, when she turned 17, her uncle called her one morning while she was sweeping the corridor. "You're a woman now," he said coldly. "We've done enough. It's time you find your own way. No ceremony. No care. Just a plastic bag with a few clothes and a firm push out the gate." Lagos became her next chapter. She took a battered commercial bus bound for Ojota. It was filled with strangers and stale air. Shola sat by the window, holding tightly to her bag and her breath. She had only 1,750 Nigerian nairas left, and no idea where to go. For 2 nights, she slept on cardboard in the market. Rain soaked her wrappers. She fought off mosquitoes and hunger. But Shola was not a girl who gave up. She began asking for work washing dishes in buka joints, sweeping compounds, selling sachet water. One day, an elderly woman who sold puff puff at a busy junction gave her a chance. "You get strength," the woman said. "Come help me. I'll feed you." Shola took the offer. She hawked on the streets of Mushin, Ajij, and Ojalegba. The city was harsh, but she met it with even harsher determination. She learned to live on 200 Nigerian nairas a day. She learned to smile at insults and thank people who underpaid her. Bit by bit, she saved money: 100 Nigerian nairas here, 500 Nigerian nairas there. Her only friend was her own voice, which she used to sing softly at night to drown her sorrow. One day, fate shifted. She met Femi near Ojota Motor Park. He was tall, with skin baked by sun and oil-stained fingers. He was fixing an old Peugeot 504 and looked frustrated. She stood nearby, waiting to sell groundnuts. "You look like you want to fight the engine," she teased. He looked up, sweat pouring. "Maybe the engine wants to fight me first." She offered him a sachet of water and a soft laugh. That was how it began. They met often, sometimes by accident, sometimes by hope. Femi would walk her home after selling hours, and they would talk about life, about pain, about dreams. He told her he had no family, that he once tried to learn welding but couldn't afford the fees. Shola, in him, saw someone who wasn't perfect but was real. She gave him pieces of herself, her past, her scars, her dreams. Eventually, she gave him something else: her trust. After nearly a year of friendship, she decided to help him. She opened her small wooden box and brought out a bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside were all her savings, over 25,000 Nigerian nairas. "I want you to start your own mechanic shed," she said. "Use this. Please." Femi looked at her, stunned. He wept quietly. "Why would you do this?" "Because I believe in you," she whispered. That seed became their future. He started a small roadside shed in Bariga. Business grew slowly. He fixed bikes, tricycles, and once in a while small cars. He gave her his heart in return. They got married in a humble traditional ceremony. The bride wore a rented geli and second-hand lace. There were no caterers or musicians. Just neighbors singing with their voices and drummers with borrowed drums. Shola beamed, even though her uncles refused to attend. "I don't need their blessing," she told Femi. "God has already blessed us." They moved into a one-room apartment in Somalu. It had a leaking roof and no fan, but it was theirs. Months passed. Shola got pregnant. It was a joyful surprise, unexpected but welcomed. Femi was thrilled, at least on the surface. He made promises about baby clothes, about painting the room, about moving to a bigger place. But underneath, cracks began to show. He came home late. He was quieter. He looked lost during antenatal visits. He avoided baby discussions. "I'm just thinking about money," he would say. "Don't worry." Shola didn't complain. She focused on carrying the child. Her belly grew. Her legs swelled. Her back ached. But every night, she would rub her stomach and say, "You're coming into love, my child. That is your wealth." Then came the 9th month. One midnight, during a thunderstorm, her water broke. Femi, panicking, rushed her to a nearby government hospital. She groaned through the pain, clutching his arm. "You'll stay, right?" "Of course," he said. "I'll just go back to the house to grab the baby bag and some cash." She nodded, breathing heavily. He left. She never saw him again. The labor lasted 5 hours. She screamed. She begged. And finally, the midwife shouted, "One boy." Then, another boy. A pause. "Wait, it's a girl." Shola fainted. When she woke up, 3 babies were beside her. Their tiny cries filled the room. A nurse smiled. "You gave birth to triplets. You're blessed." Shola burst into tears. Not of joy, of fear. The nurses waited for Femi to return. He never did. Days passed. Bills piled up. A social worker asked for his number. She gave it. It rang out. He had vanished. Discharged with pity and paper wraps, Shola returned home with 3 infants strapped to her. The neighbors stared. Some whispered blessings, others judgment. 3 babies and no husband? She probably used jazz on the man. She looks cursed. But she held her head high. She fried puff puff in the mornings with 1 baby strapped to her back. She sold zobo in the afternoons. At night, she massaged all 3 children to sleep, humming songs her mother once sang. She named the boys Toby and Daimeji, and the girl Simisola, rest in wealth. The years crawled. She faced illnesses with no money, hunger with no choice, and heartbreak with no audience. But the triplets grew, strong, playful, brilliant. When they turned 10, they began helping. Daimeji hawked sachet water after school. Toby ran errands for neighbors. Simisola helped fry akara on weekends. They never complained. And every night, she gathered them close. "You are the reason I breathe," she whispered. "Even if the world turns its back, I will never turn mine." Somewhere far away, Femi was folding clothes. He now lived in Abioye, the errand boy of an older woman who promised him good life if he left Shola. She dressed him in lace and geli for parties. He carried her handbags. People whispered behind him, "This one not gigolo." But Femi smiled because it was easier than going back to face the life he abandoned. He convinced himself that Shola would survive, that the children would forget, that time would bury his guilt. But destiny never forgets. The sun was different in Lagos. It beat down harshly, not like the mellow sun of Ibadan. It seemed to press into people's skin, their clothes, their lungs. Yet in the chaos of the city, the endless honking, the shouting, the rush of millions trying to survive, Shola found peace in motion. Her children were grown. Not yet men and women in full, but no longer children. Ayatund gained admission to study business administration at the University of Lagos. He had ideas, always bubbling, always sketching business plans in the margins of his notebooks. Tolulope chose law at Obafemi Awolowo University. His mind was sharp, full of questions, always ready to challenge injustice. And Simisola, the quiet one, got a scholarship to study medicine at the University of Ibadan. A return home, in a way. Their departure left the flat eerily silent. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, Shola woke to stillness. No noise. No triplets running around. No frying pans clanging. Just the hum of the fridge and the occasional rustle of plastic from outside. Her joints ached more now. She had developed a slight limp in her left leg. Still, she kept working. The akara stall was replaced with a small food shop, thanks to a cooperative loan and help from Pastor Adewole's wife, Mama Ruth. The community now respected Shola deeply. People came not just for her food but for her words. She spoke with grace, with strength, never bitterness. But her heart missed her children. Phone calls were frequent, but never long enough. Ayatun struggled with the cost of entrepreneurship. He started an online thrift business, but got scammed by a supplier from China. Talyalop battled loneliness and pressure in school. His roommate once insulted him, calling him charity case, because of his scholarship background. Simisola faced gender bias in medical school, constantly told to focus more on marriage than anatomy. One day, Simisola called crying. "Mama, I failed one of my clinical exams. They said I'm too soft." "Softness is not weakness," Shola said over the crackling line. "It is grace. Learn from it. Rise again." Shola sent money, even when she didn't have. She borrowed from her food suppliers, delaying payment just to send 10,000 Nigerian nairas, 20,000 Nigerian nairas. Her children never knew. She didn't want pity. She wanted them to fly. Then one day he returned. Femi, 20 years older, thinner, ashy-skinned, dressed in a worn kaftan and slippers that had seen better days. He stood in front of the shop, unsure. Shola looked up from the stew pot and froze. She knew that face, though it had aged, cracked, and sagged. "Shola," he said quietly. The name hit her like wind through an open window. She didn't speak, just stared. "I came to see the children," he added, almost as if asking permission. The air tensed. The small crowd around the shop watched silently. "They are not children anymore," Shola replied, voice steady. "They are warriors, and you are 20 years too late." He looked down. Shame shaded his face. "I know. I have no excuse." She could have yelled, could have slapped him, could have cried, but instead she reached for a plate, scooped rice and beans, and handed it to him. "Eat, then go." He sat by the gutter and ate slowly. When he finished, he left without a word. For 3 nights, Shola couldn't sleep. Not because of anger, but confusion. She thought she had closed that chapter. But now it reopened like a half-healed wound. The triplets returned home for semester break. Shola told them. He came. They sat silently. Then Ayatun said, "Do you want us to see him?" "No, not yet. Only if your heart is ready." Talyalop was quiet the longest. "I want to ask him why." Shola nodded. "Then ask. But do not carry his guilt on your back." The visit happened. They met him at a park near Oshodi. It was short. Awkward. No hugs. Only questions. He cried. Simisola remained calm. Ayatun stayed neutral. Talyalop asked the hard things. In the end, they walked away. Not out of hate, but out of clarity. Their lives were no longer defined by his absence. Months passed. Simisola topped her class and received an international grant for a research project on sickle cell. Ayatun's business bounced back with the help of a mentor he met at NYSC camp. Talyalop won a moot court competition and earned a summer internship at a top Lagos firm. Shola's health declined. Nothing dramatic. Just age folding her in. She began writing letters to each child. Just in case. In Simisola's, she wrote, "You are light. Do not dim it for anyone. Marry when you want if you want. Your healing hands are enough." In Talyalop's, "You see injustice clearly. Don't forget compassion. The world needs law with heart." In Ayatun's, "Build. But also rest. Let your ambitions serve you, not enslave you." She sealed them, kept them in her Bible. Then came the fire. A transformer exploded near their flat. Sparks rained down like devil's fireworks. Flames spread quickly. People screamed. Buckets flew. Shola tried to save her shop stock, but got stuck inside the corridor. Neighbors pulled her out, coughing, unconscious. She woke up in the hospital. The triplets rushed in days later. She smiled, even as oxygen ticked by her side. "Mama," Simisola cried. "I'm here," she whispered. "I will always be." The shop was gone. The flat ruined. But the triplets pulled their resources. Rebuilt. Rented a new place. Bought her a better bed, softer mattress, new wrapper. For the first time in her life, Shola didn't have to work. She sat by the window. Watched the world go by. Read her Bible. Laughed with children from the compound. Prayed. The struggle didn't end. But it changed. Because now, her sacrifices were no longer in secret. They bore fruit. They stood tall. And so did she. The days were quieter, but not empty. Simisola would call during lunch breaks from the hospital. Talyalop updated her on court cases and read to her lines from books. Ayatun sometimes sent her audio messages while traveling for business. One Sunday morning, The church invited her to share her testimony. She stood slowly, leaning on her cane, and spoke to the congregation about faith, patience, and resilience. "I used to beg life for mercy," she said, her voice steady. "But now I thank it for molding me." People wept. Youth took notes. Elders nodded. The church offered to name their new women's center in her honor, the Abioye Empowerment Center. That evening, Mama Ruth brought her a frame with the certificate. Shola touched the glass with trembling fingers. "Who am I," she whispered, "that I should be honored?" "You are the root," Mama Ruth said. "Without roots, no tree stands." As the triplets reached graduation, they began to plan a surprise for her. A small house, close to nature, not far from Ibadan. A return to peace. On the day they took her to see it, she stood under a mango tree in the compound, tears running freely. "You did all this?" she asked. Talialope nodded. "You did this, Mama. We only returned it." And in that moment, surrounded by her children, grown strong, full of promise, Shola smiled not from relief, but from fulfillment. The house nestled in the quiet outskirts of Ibadan, where birds sang without fear of generators roaring, and the wind knew the rhythm of peace. It was modest but beautiful, 3 bedrooms, a neat garden, a kitchen with polished counters, and a veranda where Shola could sit every evening and greet the sun as it bowed out. This was the house her triplets built for her, brick by brick, blessing by blessing. For years, life had pushed Shola into corners, into silence, into sacrifice. But now life opened doors. At 56, she was no longer a hawker, no longer the woman mocked for her mania jobs, no longer the abandoned wife. She was Mama Doctor, Mama Barrister, Mama CEO. Everywhere she went in the neighborhood, people hailed her. Children came to her for sweets and stories. Women came for prayers. Young mothers leaned on her wisdom. She became what her uncles tried to erase, a legacy. The Shola'S Empowerment Center opened its doors 6 months after her move to Ibadan. Fully funded by grants sourced by Simisola and donations from Ayatun's networks, the center trained single mothers in tailoring, soap making, catering, and literacy. Each intake graduated with a small startup grant, funded by Talialope's legal consultancy firm. Shola visited twice a week. She sat in a corner during classes, sometimes correcting grammar, sometimes telling stories of her youth. "There was a time I cried because I could not buy a tuber of yam," she once said to a group of women. "Now I give bags away. Life is not always fair, but faith makes it bearable." A documentary was made about her life. A small production company heard of her story and came down from Lagos. Cameras followed her through her routines. They recorded her peeling yam, telling jokes with her neighbors, attending church, hugging her triplets. The film, titled Shola'S Strength, was streamed across platforms. It was shared by women's groups, churches, NGOs, and celebrities. Her story struck a chord across generations. Not because it was extraordinary, but because it was true. It was the story of millions, but with a brighter ending. One morning, while tending to her garden, she received a call from the State Ministry of Women Affairs. They wanted to recognize her work publicly. During the state's Women of Impact Awards, Shola received a standing ovation. Dressed in a blue lace iro and buba, geli neatly tied by Simisola, she walked up to the stage and spoke in both English and Yoruba. "I am not here because I am strong alone. I am here because God never left me, because my children carried me when my legs could not, and because pain does not win when love is louder." Ayatund watched with teary eyes from the front row. Talialope held Simisola's hand. All around them, people clapped, some cried. The recognition brought more opportunities. Shola was invited to speak at women's conferences. Universities brought her in to address students. She even gave a TEDx talk in Ibadan titled, "From Brokenness to Blooming." Yet she remained simple. She insisted on cooking for herself. Insisted on sitting outside every evening. Insisted on praying at dawn. In her home, there were pictures everywhere, of her triplets as babies, as teenagers in school uniforms, and now as professionals. Her favorite was one of the 4 of them sitting under the mango tree, laughing free. Her health was stable, but she moved slower. Her knees complained, but her spirit danced. One day, Simisola returned from work, unusually quiet. Shola noticed. "Omomi, what is it?" Simisola hesitated. Then she said, "There's a man. He wants to marry me." Shola smiled. "Is he kind?" "Very. And patient." "Then what is holding you?" "I didn't want to leave you." Shola reached for her hand. "I did not carry you this far to cage you. I raised you to love boldly. Go." Build your life. I will always be your home. The wedding was small but joyful. Ayatun flew in from Dubai. Talyalope came from Abuja. The three of them danced with their mother in the center of the floor, the crowd chanting, "Mama Triplet. Mama Triplet." Years passed gently. Talyalope opened a law firm focused on family law and women's rights. He built a legal aid scheme that helped abandoned wives get justice. He often cited his mother's strength in his speeches. Ayatun expanded his company into tech. He launched an app that connected small businesses in Nigeria with global buyers. He credited his business instincts to watching his mother sell akara at dawn. Simisola founded a foundation providing healthcare to rural mothers. She named it Shola Hands. One of the most unforgettable moments in Shola's rise came when the president of Nigeria invited her to Abuja for a roundtable on women's economic empowerment. She sat among governors' wives and international dignitaries, sharing her story of survival and hope. She wasn't intimidated, she was inspired. That night, she returned to her hotel and prayed. Not for herself, but for every woman still in the middle of her storm. Soon after, a publishing house approached her. They wanted her to write a memoir. With the help of a ghostwriter, she penned From Pain to Purpose, the Shola Abioye story. The book sold out in weeks. Schools added it to their reading lists. It was even translated into French and Hausa. With the income from the book and speaking engagements, she set up the Abioye Fund, a trust dedicated to helping widows and abandoned mothers access capital for small businesses. In the first year, the fund helped 143 women. Media outlets continued to follow her journey. She was profiled by international news channels, featured in magazines, and invited onto talk shows. But through it all, she never let fame cloud her purpose. Every December, she hosted a community Christmas party in Ibadan. Hundreds attended. There was jollof rice, fried chicken, small chops, and music. Children received toys and clothes. Single mothers received food hampers and cash gifts. Her house became a haven of joy. In her late 60s, Shola began slowing down. She no longer traveled as much, but she mentored women online. Her WhatsApp group, Shola's Circle, grew to over 500 members. Daily devotionals, business tips, and motivational stories flowed through it. One particular December, Simisola returned home with her husband and 2 children. They found Shola sitting in the garden, holding a photo album. She looked up, smiled, and said, "Did I ever tell you how your father ran away after you were born?" They laughed. Her grandchildren sat beside her, eager for another story. She told it again. How pain birthed purpose. How rejection became redirection. How fire refined but love restored. And as night fell and the stars blinked awake, Shola rocked her youngest grandchild and whispered, "Strength is not how loud you fight, but how long you keep walking." She had walked far. And now she was home. Moral lesson. Strength through sacrifice, faith, and love. Shola's strength is not just the story of one woman, it is a powerful reflection of the silent endurance and quiet victories that define the lives of many women across the world. At its core, this story teaches us that true strength is not always found in muscles or might, but in unwavering resolve, sacrifice, and love. Shola begins her journey as an orphaned girl cast out by cruel relatives and left to fend for herself in a harsh world. Even after being betrayed by the man she trusted most, her husband, she does not crumble. Instead, she rises, holding tightly to her children, refusing to let their future mirror her pain. The lesson here is that resilience is born when we choose responsibility over resentment, even when the odds are stacked against us. In a society that ridiculed her and labeled her bad luck, Shola refused to allow the judgments of others to define her. She worked relentlessly, hawking, washing, cleaning, and doing whatever it took to feed her children. Through her actions, we learn that dignity does not depend on the kind of work one does, but on the purpose behind it. Her story shatters the myth that a woman's worth is tied to a man's presence. She became both father and mother, protector and provider, proving that one determined woman can lay the foundation for generations. Another vital lesson from Shola's story is the transformative power of love and legacy. She gave all she had to raise her triplets, and they returned that love by becoming agents of change in the world, giving back to her and to the society that once looked down on them. Shola's life reminds us that when you pour love into others, especially in your lowest moments, that love multiplies and returns in abundance. Faith also plays a key role in her story. Shola never lost her belief that better days would come. Her prayers, her silence, her waiting Her tears all were forms of faith in action. Even when she had no family, no home, and no husband, she believed that God was not done with her. That belief became the foundation upon which her future was built. Faith, especially when paired with hard work, opens doors no man can close. Finally, the story teaches us that every storm eventually passes, and every seed of kindness blossoms in time. Shola did not become wealthy overnight. She did not gain fame easily. But every small step she took led to a life of peace, fulfillment, and honor not just for herself, but for those she inspired. She used her scars to heal others, turning her pain into purpose. In a world that often rewards shortcuts and selfishness, Shola'S Strength stands as a beacon reminding us that the true path to greatness lies in sacrifice, compassion, integrity, and endurance. She shows us that we all have the capacity to rise, not in spite of our struggles, but because of them. If you enjoy our videos, please take a moment to follow. Subscribe to our channel to stay updated on our upcoming stories. Thank you.